For 11.3, we're going to be dealing with what we call the quadratic formula. On your slides, you should have the formula given to you, but I'm going to give it to you as a story. As long as we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are numbers, a cannot be 0, we're going to use the quadratic formula, and my quadratic formula will be a bad boy went to a so-called radical party. Because the boy was being squared, he lost a chance with 4 awesome chicks. Everything was over at 2 a.m. I'm going to be using my A, my B, and my C from the quadratic formula into this formula. Now let's see this in an example. But before we move on, let me remind you that you have to do the top of the fraction first, and then you divide by 2a. All right, so let's take a look. My A here is 6. My B is -5, and my C is -4. Let me remember the quadratic formula. The hard part of the quadratic formula is the inside of the square root. So let me worry about that first. I know how to do b squared minus 4ac. My b is -5, so I'm looking at -5 squared minus 4 times 6 times -4. Right? B squared minus 4ac, all of it inside a square root. So I have the -5 squared, that's 25. A negative with another negative is going to make it plus. Now 4 times 6 times 4. Let's see. That's 96. So I have 25 plus 96, which is 121. But then the square root of 121, I know that's 11. So once again, I was just working the square root part. Now I'm going to use the formula, the whole formula. I see negative b, but my b is negative to begin with. So negative of a negative, that's going to give me positive 5 plus or minus 11, because I'm not going to do the whole square root again, over 2 times a, so I get 12. Since a is 6. All right, so now these is going to give me my two solutions for x. For the first solution, I'm going to use the plus sign. So I'm looking at this 5 plus 11 over 12. 16 over 12, we can simplify that. Let me divide each by 4. So I'm going to say that x is equal to 4 over 3. That's one solution. For the other solution, I'm going to use the minus sign. 5 minus 11, that's a -6 over 12. So I'm going to say that x in this other case is -1/2. We could have factored. If you're good with factoring, we could have factored those. You guys see how it was factored? And as you guys can see, I get the same answers. All right, let's try it again. My A in this case is 9. My B in this case is 12. And my C in this case is 4. Let me remember the quadratic formula. Once again, I'm doing the square root first. So b squared, I'm looking at 12 squared minus 4 times 9 times 4. All of this inside the square root. So I have that 144 minus, and see, 4 times 9 times 4. That gives me 144. And all of this inside a radical. So I have the square root of 0, which we know it's 0. Okay. Now, the way I'm going to do my quadratic formula, negative b, so I'm going to go -12 plus or minus 0, because that's what I just worked earlier, over 18. For my first solution, I'm going to use the plus sign. So on the top, I have negative 12 plus 0. That is negative 12 over 18. I can simplify that. Let me divide each by 6. So I'm going to get my answer is negative 2 over 3. Now, if I use the minus sign, so this is using the plus sign. If I use the minus sign, I'm going to get negative 12 minus 0 on top, which is negative 12 over 18, which simplifies again to negative 2 over 3. I'm not going to say I get a different answer. That is my answer that I already had. So that's the value of x. Every time we get the absolute value, the square root of 0, we're only going to get one answer. Remember that because we're going to see it in a minute. Here, I don't have the everything to the left side and equal to 0. So in this case, I'm going to move it to the left side. I have 4x squared minus 8x plus 1 is equal to 0. I can see my a is 4, my b is negative 8, my c is 1. Let me remember the quadratic formula. I'm going to do the radical first. So I have negative 8 all squared minus 4 times 4 times 1. And all of this inside the square root. So I have 64 minus 16 inside the square root. Now 64 minus 16, that is 48. The square root of 48. Now 48 is not a perfect square. However, we learned how to simplify radicals. I'm thinking of 48 as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. So at least I'm going to say this simplifies to 4 radical 3. At least I'm going to simplify it. Okay, now let me use my quadratic formula. Negative b, my b is negative to begin with. So negative of a negative, that's going to give me 8 plus or minus 4 radical 3 over 2 times a, that gives me 8. Now, the top sign, I cannot combine them. They're not like terms. So when I use the plus sign, I'm just going to have 8 plus 4 radical 3 over 8. At least simplify your numbers. I see my big numbers. They can all be divided by 4. So I'm going to have 2 plus 1 radical 3 over 2. That's one answer. If I use the minus sign, I'm going to put it up here. Well, that's what x equals to. If I use the minus sign, I have 8 minus 4 radical 3 over 8. At least simplify it. So I'm going to say that x equals 4 minus radical 3. 2 minus radical 3 over 2. Remember the quadratic formula, I'm trying to work the square root first, and then I use the whole formula.